Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Maham Jyotir Gamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Avir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Panityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. And reach us through and through ourselves. And evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning, good morning. My subject is the question of food. And I take my title from a chapter in a book by Swami Vedarupananda entitled Spiritual Practice. And the question of food is simply, what is the proper diet for the practice of yoga and meditation? And what is the best way to prepare and partake of food? The Vedanta philosophy teaches us that you are a divine immortal soul, that you are pure consciousness. In order to realize that, we have to purify our bodies and our minds. We have to undergo a process of sanctification and purification. In the Chandogya Upanishad, it says, seventh chapter, Ahara Shuddhau, Sattva Shuddhi, Sattva Shuddhau, Dravasmriti. When the food is pure, then the mind becomes pure. When the mind is pure, then the memory of our true nature remains. So let's just look first at that idea about how would we determine the relative purity of a kind of food. And in order to understand that, we need a little introduction here, a little background in the Sankhya philosophy. Principle number one, two concepts. Concept number one, this world evolved, that is nature, with a capital N, including external nature and all of our time, space, and causation, evolved from primordial nature, which exists in three modes. That is, there are three modes of being: sattva, rajas, and tamas, the three gunas. This is the first concept that we need to get clear. We could call them, well, it's pre-modern science. What does that mean? Well, we could call what is everything made of, is the question. And the idea that that there is matter stuff, and there's energy stuff, and there's intelligence stuff. We can think like that. This is the way the ancients used to think. There's three aspects. And that these three gunas exist in the beginning in perfect equilibrium, peace, harmony. But then the equilibrium is disturbed, and hence the whole evolution begins. Now in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it says Ajam, Ekam, Lohita, Shukla Krishnam, the divine, that is, there is one unborn, divine, feminine being, red, white, and black. So here we have kind of a color coding for the three gunas, red, white, and black, for these three energies which existed in the beginning of time. Now, the second concept we need to understand our subject this morning is the ancient idea of the 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. You don't have to go to chemistry class and learn all those hundreds of elements. Just make it simple. And they evolved, well, from the most subtle, from the most causal elements, through the subtle to the gross. And now we're in a cycle of evolution, going from the gross to the more subtle to the causal. And so everything can be explained in terms of these 5 elements, which we have discussed in detail on other occasions. And so there's kind of a deep associative meaning with the sattva, rajas, and tamasic elements. Now, if you put those 2 together, we have 3 and we have 5. If you put those 3 and those 5 together, you can construct a kind of a grid, of a mental sort system, of an organizing, an epistemic principle of organization, a classification system, whereby you can analyze anything in the world. And if you read in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 16th chapter, you see that they do exactly that they begin to analyze. Now we're interested, as spiritual aspirants, we're interested in our thought. Well, that can be analyzed by the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, accord with the 3 gunas, our speech, our behavior, the puja and actions that we do, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. So this is a method whereby that enables us to discriminate. It's just a helpful, useful method for spiritual aspirants to discriminate, that is to live with discrimination. So in the 16th chapter, after discussing these other subjects, it moves to the subject of food. And it describes food as of 3 types: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Now, the American English has gobbled up these words, of course, like all the other words. Find them in an American English dictionary. Sattvic, rajasic, we use the Indo-European IC ending, ik, to make the Sanskrit ending IKA, but it's the same. It's the same ending. So let's just look first let's just run through these types of food and see where we stand. Let's consider, for example, some tamasic food. Now, tamasic food is associated with the element of the earth. And you can think heavy, dark, dirt. Think about tamasic food is the kind of food which is regarded as taboo among many ancient cultures. In ancient India, of course, they had it includes meat, beef. Muslims don't eat pork. This idea of tamasic food also includes any kind of food that really is harmful for us. And we know what that is. That just means any kind of deep fried, high sugar, high fat food that's prepackaged, that's all prepared and derived from all through an industrial process. Doesn't have much food value for us. That's the food. And the drink, of course, we can think of some intoxicating liquors that cloud and befuddle our mind. And these things together comprise what we call tamasic food. Tamasic food is what we today would call junk food. Fast food. Fast food means, yeah, it's fast, but it doesn't have any nutritional value. It's plastic. It's dead food. But sometimes when we're in a rush and we're not in a mindful state, maybe it is that we snack on such foods or we eat such foods. It may be that our mind, in fact, is in a mood. We're under the influence of the guna of tamas. And so we just eat some of those foods. That's our natural predilection. We're naturally drawn. It's okay. That's our state of mood. Now let's see how we're getting into the states and our states of mind. Now let's contrast that, for example, with what would be called rajasic food. The second category. First category was color-coded black. Second category is color-coded red. As rajas. Rajas are correlated with the elements of fire and of rushing water. There's a lot of energy. This is the energy stuff in the universe. We can think, for example, this is the way ancients used to think. We're trying to reconstruct how they used to think about pre-scientific analysis, and yet very helpful, useful analysis for our practice. Rajasic food. Just imagine if you were to go out for a luncheon with some of your co-workers, and you look around for a restaurant and you find one particular place is very popular. You walk in there and there's popular music and a lot of energy in the air and people are talking and moving around, and you go there and you order your lunch. Maybe you order some chicken or some fish and look down, you have all these different side dishes, and all the side dishes come on the table and you compare and talk about them, and everybody is animated. And you sample all those foods, and maybe you get a gourmet coffee to go. Or maybe a big glass of sparkling soda water. This is what we call rajasic food. That's the kind of, you'll say, hey, that sounds like the kind of food that I like. That sounds like what's wrong with that? That sounds like a perfectly normal thing. That's the food that we enjoy. Yeah. That's because rajas is the guna that predominates in the mind. Rajas means that it's all about the of course the yogis. You may say, well, what's the problem with that food? Well, we may say, for one thing, that we feel it's very enjoyable. It's a very pleasurable experience to be there talking with our friends, but after all, the purpose of life is not pleasure. See, this is the way the yogi's thinking. And the other yogi is thinking also, yeah, but there's one thing that's the bhakta is also thinking, yeah, this is very nice, but there's something's missing, and that's Ishvara. There's no God here. That is, nobody talked anything of all these people. They're talking about the food, but there's no higher presence here. That's their analysis. That's because of rajasic. That's the mood of our mind. No problem. If we're in that rajasic mood of mind, then just to notice, this is the operation of the guna that's where we're operating. and we're enjoying our food. Very good. But see, now our purpose here now is discrimination, mindfulness, not just enjoying ourselves. Purpose is not what do you enjoy. The purpose is what is how can we realize our true nature. So they think, well, let's contrast that rajasic food, for example, with sattvic food. Now, I'm just going to give you a scenario of these things. We have to kind of understand these things by walking around them and just by association. Just imagine sattvic food. Okay, well, just imagine like maybe in an old-fashioned home. Maybe they used to grow their vegetables in their own garden. And the mother goes out and picks those vegetables, brings them in, and cooks that homegrown. Everything is prepared with tender, loving care. And then the whole family comes in and sit down, and the mom and the dad and the children, and they say a prayer. And then they partake of that food, maybe some vegetarian food. That is, but all home cooked, freshly prepared, and then maybe to drink, maybe they have a glass of pure water, and that's what we'd call maybe like sattvic food. Let's look here at that. Let's look here at the glass of water, because when we call about food, well, anything that we eat or drink, well, okay. Now we analyze that, and we can say, what's the water? The drink of choice for the yogis is, of course, pure water. But water is also natural, and it's subject to the three gunas. And so even in the partaking of a glass of water, we can use our discrimination. You remember how one time Sri Ramakrishna, he visited the house of the Pandit Shashadhar Tarkachujamani. And there he was sitting there with the devotees. It was a very hot day. And he asked for a glass of water. And someone went there to the kitchen, brought him a glass, handed him the water, and he held it up to his lips to drink, and he couldn't drink it. Try it again. Set it down. And Swami Vedarupananda, the young Narendra at that time, he'd heard similar stories about the life of Sri Ramakrishna, how extremely sensitive his nervous system had become, so that he was attuned to this sensitivity to levels of vibration. And he always questioned these things. And so on this occasion also, he was going to question, he said, is this an instance of that? Why didn't he drink that water? And so the devotee who had brought the water, well, he was wearing rudraksha beads, and he had marks of religion on his forehead, and he took the water back into the kitchen. And Narendra went back into the kitchen later. He looked at that water. Had drawn the water. Was there some rust or some dirtiness in the water? No, it was perfectly clear, clean water. That wasn't the problem. There's no jati dosha. But maybe there's nimitta dosha, that is different kinds of purity. Maybe there is he holds the glass up. Maybe the glass was dirty. Maybe that's why he didn't drink. Looked at the glass up in the light. No, it was crystal clear. No problem. It's only later on that he found out on inquiry, that this person who had brought him the water was of notorious bad character. And everybody kind of knew it. And this is the Indian idea of the mystery of human vibrations. We believe that we have all around us an aura, We have 3 or 4 auras. One of those auras is our character. Our character emanates from us like an aura, and everything that you touch leaves a fingerprint of your character on it. So much for the sattvic water and the sattvic food. So we have those 3 kinds of food. Now we can ask the question here: what is a yogic diet? This is our question. What is the yogic diet? Well, the yogic diet is a sattvic diet. It consists of plant-based foodstuffs, like fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, in season, hopefully, ideally, freshly picked, in season, prepared. Maybe a little bit of eggs or milk. But with the avoidance of meat. Now, why, when the avoidance of meat? Well, there's some good reasons for the avoidance of meat. One is, you read a book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair about the meat processing plants around the turn of the century. That will sufficiently cover that subject. The second argument is the argument from nutrition. A lot of good arguments against the digestion of meat. Third argument is from environmentalists and eating high off the food chain. And the fourth argument is the argument from moral philosophy. Now, it's this fourth argument that's of most interest. I leave the rest of all to your research. The fourth argument is more to our immediate interest, because it's this argument of ahimsa. That it was the controlling factor in the reason why the whole of India, which was once a beef-eating nation in Vedic times, dramatically changed to completely vegetarian after the Buddha and the first precept of Buddhism, which is ahimsa. They became vegetarian. And Swami Vivekananda, now I'm going to give you 2 quotations. Usually I don't make quotations. I try to give a more reasonable approach. But here's two appeals to authority, as it were, on this subject. He whose aim is to lead a purely spiritual life, for him a vegetarian diet is recommended. It's quote number 1. You can look these up, Karma Yoga. Quote number 2, the ideal is not to eat meat, not to injure any creature, because all animals are our brothers. You can process that in your understanding. Notice 2 things about these quotations. There's caveats. This is not a categorical imperative about eating meat. You have to consider here what is saying. He whose ideal, let us say, he whose aim is to lead a purely spiritual life. See, they're talking, therefore, you say, well, yeah, but my aim is not to lead a purely spiritual life. Sounds like they're talking about yogis in the Himalayas. They're not talking about just regular people. You could argue like that. His aim is to lead a purely, well, my aim's not to lead a purely spiritual life, so I'm okay. You could argue like that, yeah. And Swamiji says, the ideal is not to eat meat. Notice the word ideal. These are ideals. They're not injunctions for everyone. They don't apply to everyone. They apply to what we consider it ideally would be the in accord with the highest moral standards. So, with that being said, we can see some of the idea about a yogic diet, sattvic diet. Basic idea of these three gunas, very simple: moving slowly onward and upward, trying to go from the lower to the higher, and trying to improve and to sanctify and to purify our bodies and minds. Let's look at another question here about often asked about on this particular subject of food, and that is fasting. Because a lot of time we see, well, in religions everywhere, in pre-modern, in ancient times, of course, well, even today, devotees in India, a good devotee maybe will fast twice a month on the Ekadashi day, and they'll Christians. I mean, I think Roman Catholics. A good Catholic would not eat meat on Fridays, and certainly on ceremonial days. All religions of the world. In fact, in the Catechism of Catholicism, Catholic Church, it says that there are three good works. One is prayer, one is almsgiving, and the third is fasting. The idea is on special occasions. It has the idea that was considered to be a good work. Now, what's the Vedantic attitude towards the fasting? And the idea is very simple. The yogis, even from the most ancient times, regarded this as an advanced course. Let's say that you're living on a ranch, and you're a cowboy, and you like you're used to riding horses, and you find it they bring in a wild horse, and you find it very exhilarating to get on that horse and maybe to break the horse, train it so it becomes a rider's horse. Very difficult thing to do. A cowboy can do it. But what if you're a city slicker that comes in from the town, you're a dude ranch, and you think you're going to get on that horse and you're going to do the same thing? Well, maybe you'll end up with a broken arm or a broken leg. And the idea is that this is not a practice that is a practice that is useful to us to attain liberation. The authority on this matter was the first of all the great yogis of the world, and that is Lord Buddha. Buddha himself, as you know, you read in the life of Buddha, how before he attained enlightenment, he used to practice extreme asceticism, including with going without sleep or anything with the yogis, the Jain ascetics on the banks of the Nairanjani River. 6 years he practiced these austerities, and he would never eat anything. So one day he was sitting down under the tree, and he's going to withdraw his mind into meditation, and he felt like he was going to die. He felt like he was going to lose consciousness and pass out. He was so malnourished, and so at that time, a milkmaid passed by that way, and she offered him a bowl of rice milk, that is maybe payash. He took that bowl and he drank it, and he filled his whole body filled with energy and with strength. And with that, he was able to finish his meditation and to attain enlightenment, and came to the conclusion that asceticism is not the path for attaining liberation, and the teaching of the Buddha from the earliest times was called the middle path. This is the teachings of the yogis. Follow the middle path. Middle path means you don't sleep too much. This is Bhagavad Gita. You read the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter. What is a yogi? You can't be a yogi if you sleep too much, and if you sleep too little. You can't be a yogi if you talk too much, or if you talk too little. You can't be a yogi if you eat too much, or if you eat too little. So this is the old Greek idea of what is a virtue? A virtue is the mean. It's the middle between two extremes. And we have the vices of excess, and we have the vices of lack. Between those two, there's a middle ground, and that would be called, defined by Aristotle, that's the virtuous path. The vices of deficiency, somewhere between deficiency and excess, there's a golden mean. Now, so far we've been talking about the food, the kind of food that we buy in the supermarket. But the subject of food, of course, is one which immediately we know has to expand. By food, man is body, mind, and soul. So enough about the body. Let's think about the food for the mind and for the person and the soul. You know, in the psychology that there's a psychologist, Abraham Maslow, who drew the hierarchy of the needs that we have in our psychology. All of our psychological ideals ordered in the form of a pyramid. It's a very helpful idea, which he expanded on from the ancient tantric concept of the chakras in the body, how there are 7 levels of consciousness in our body. And those are psychological levels. Each one of those levels has associated with it a worldview, and it has associated with it certain behaviors and needs and processing that are necessary for it to function in an optimal manner, for there to be flourishing of the chakra at that level. The food for the Muladhara chakra is safety and security. The food for the Swadhisthana chakra is sense pleasures. The food for the Manipura chakra is success and power. The food for the Anahata chakra is love and belonging. The food for the Vishuddha chakra is removing, you know all this. The Vishuddha chakra is knowledge. So like that, there are different levels, as the levels of our conscious life. All of these require sustenance, that is food. At the level of the heart, we need food. We need emotional food. We need intellectual food. So that's metaphorically associating our idea of expanding the idea of what we mean here by sustenance, by nourish. It's the same. Nourishment, nutrition for our mind at some level. There's things that we have to do and that we have to see and experience. That's all food in a expanding on a larger sense. But we need to nourish our minds in order to flourish. So the idea is, how can we best succeed? We're body, mind. See now how we're using this idea of the discrimination Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic, moving in the levels of the chakras. Tamasic, the lower, to the higher, to the higher. That's the idea of yoga. You go from the lower to the higher. You go from the if you want to look at it like on vibrational levels, the denser, heavier vibration. These are all this is not New Age. These are not New Age terms. These are very ancient ideas. We go from the lower vibration to the world of higher vibration. Okay, so we are body, mind, and we left something out, and that is the soul. And we nourish the body. We nourish the body. What about the soul? Well, that's a kind of a different subject now, because the soul, Jesus says in the Bible, man shall not live by bread alone, but by the word that proceedeth from the mouth of God. Whoa, now that's not in psychology book. That's not in now we're getting into soul, God, and religion. To nourish our soul, we need to hear the words proceed from the mouth of God. And well, let me see if I can remember the lyrics to an old country gospel song by Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Here's the lyrics that go like this. They were talking about the word of God. Jesus had gone out in the desert, and he was preaching by the Sea of Galilee. And the lyrics go to the crowd of people went out in the desert to hear the good Lord talk. And after they had listened to him for a while, they got hungry. And but they had nothing to eat except for 2 loaves of fishes and 5 loaves of bread. And so the good Lord said, yeah, bring me the bread and the fish. And let me try a little idea I have in my head about those 2 little fishes and 5 loaves of bread. And he broke the bread up, and he broke the fish up and handed it to the disciples. And they passed it all around to the assembled crowd of thousands. And everyone, and after it was over, there was a lot left over after all had been fed on those 2 loaves of 2 little fishes and 5 loaves of bread. Those are the lyrics. Moral of the song, well, this is how the whole world could be fed. If we would hear the words of the gospel, hear the word of God, live by the word of God, and love one another, then the whole world could be fed on just those 2 little fishes and 5 loaves of bread. That's like the word of God for our soul. Well, they were lucky. They're in the Sea of Galilee. They were listening to the words of an incarnation. That's what we need for Jesus says in the Bible. He goes even farther. He becomes more Vedantic, more sounding like a Vedantic teacher when he says, I am the bread. I am the bread. Now, what does that mean? I mean, well, metaphorically, he's using a metaphor to saying that I am something, that I am that which is essential, and I am that which is the source of your sustenance. Obviously, he's speaking there when he says I. He doesn't mean the person. He means Vedantic ideas, of course, is what he speaks. When he says I, he's speaking of his Christ consciousness. The Christ consciousness within us. That's what's speaking to us through the Bible. I am the bread. It's your own words. It's the word from your own self, from your own soul that's speaking to you through the scriptures. that's saying, I am the bread. That is, you don't need anything other than your soul to assuage hunger and thirst. Come unto me, ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. This is our soul, words of our soul, as it were, speaking to us, calling us to our consciousness, and the teachings here of soul, God, and religion, which we have not just to, it's not enough for us just to hear these. We also have to consume them, as it were. We eat them and digest them, assimilate them, and embody them. That's all part of the idea of this process of sustaining ourselves. We have to embody these ideas, assimilate them. And so, certainly, if we can assimilate these divine ideas about soul, God, and religion, and do spiritual practice, and come to embody these teachings, then we become, just by our nature, we become a yogi. We become, that's kind of like an ideal of a source of purification. And that is a yogi who sits down, who sits to eat. Whatever he eats, doesn't matter. If he takes the name of God and he offers it to God, immediately that food is purified. If a jnana yogi were to say to eat any kind of food, he offers that food to the fire of Brahman within his heart. And so immediately that food is purified. And if a karma yogi does any work, he offers it, the fruits of that action, to God, and that work, that action, becomes purified. And similarly it is so. There, if we meet, whoever we talking to other people, if we're talking about soul, God, and religion, immediately the conversation becomes purified. And so this is the ideal of our subject this morning. And to think about moving ourselves from the lower to the higher, from tamas, rajas to sattvic, to being mindful of our living. Let's say, not just our eating, but our living and our processing of everything in our life. Okay? I think we'll stop here.